This is a special meeting for the Fall Valley Community Service District. The topic tonight is a sewer system in MacArthur. Because we have 3 elected board members here, we have to do this as a regular meeting. So roll call of directors, Moneth,
Hendricks,
and Paulette and Ron Calder will not be with us this evening. Is there any public comment before we get started about anything except what we're covering tonight? You cannot comment about what we're doing tonight. No public comment, fine. Then I'd like to make some introductions. Brett Hendricks, board member, Tyler DeWitt, board member, Jerry Moneth, chairman of the board. Over at the summit table, we have Paul and Kid, both from Pace Engineering. Our general manager from the district is Cecil. I don't think I need to mention his last name, everybody knows. Also, yeah, I forgot your name. Ken
Henderson.
And he's from Shasta County, and he will be involved in questions and answers later. And the 3 people over here are going to be the ones answering our questions eventually. Pace Engineering has put together a program to let you know a little bit about what we're looking at and what the future could bring. After we get the presentation, it may answer most of your questions, but you may still have questions, and we'll do a question-answer period afterwards. We want to do one at a time when we're doing home so that everybody can hear the question and the answer. Anyways, with that, Paul, it's all yours.
Can I interrupt you a minute? Is there anybody in the audience that's Spanish is their native language or only language? Okay, because we're waiting for our interpreter. I'm right here. Oh! All right, thank you. I haven't met you face to face yet. Okay. If somebody joins us, Rodrigo, will you come up and take over at that time, repeating
Yes.
what Paul says? Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, good evening, everyone. Good, you guys hear me back? I'm kind of a loud talker, so I don't need a microphone normally. But as Jerry indicated, Keith and I are from Pace Engineering in Reading. We're about a 65-person firm down there. And we specialize in water, wastewater systems, mechanical, structural, electrical, surveying, kind of do a little bit of everything. We really specialize working for small communities like MacArthur, Fall River. Personally, I'm city engineer for the cities of Dunsmuir, Weed, Mount Shasta, Wairika, a small little district outside Reading, Centerville Community Services District. So we specialize in working for small communities. We like that. I grew up in Weed, went to Weed High School, called in Siskiyous, and transferred down, did my schooling at Davis and Sac State, so I'm a small town guy anyway. My position is I'm the president and managing engineer of Pace, and my kind of specialty is water, wastewater. Keith is one of our most experienced senior wastewater and water designers, and he's been working on the project. So kind of why we're here tonight is the district has been working for several years actually on potential sewer service to the MacArthur area. There's been some changes recently in available funding from the state that makes this kind of project very attractive from a financial perspective, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So kind of my presentation will focus a little bit on the background of how we got here, a little bit on the funding, talk a little bit about the project, and then built into the presentation is about 19 or so questions that we think some of you might ask. So we're going to kind of beat you to the punch and present the question and answer. I doubt that we'll answer all your questions, and so we'll be here as long as we need to answer questions. So with that, I'll get started. And so a little bit on the project background. Back in 2016, the district applied for some funding through the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. Very common state funding program. They fund lots of projects throughout the state, especially Northern California, and they like to target small, disadvantaged, and severely disadvantaged communities. So you'll see this acronym CWSRF a lot in the presentation, and that's who would fund a potential project. So about that time, 2016, the district did a system-wide master plan, really focused on Fall River Mills because you have a sewage collection system and treatment plant there. But the master plan also looked at what it would take to serve MacArthur. And then actually a construction funding application was submitted in 2020 to provide limited infrastructure in MacArthur, which basically limited to serving the high school. But it required all this infrastructure down Highway 299 to get it to Fall River Mills. It didn't attempt to serve anything other than the high school. Of course, it would provide backbone to bring other facilities in, but the application that was submitted to the state was just to serve the high school. And it consisted of 3 lift stations, several thousand feet of forced main and gravity sewer down 299, and there's a lift station right in front of Mayor's Memorial Hospital that it would tie into. So several weeks ago, or months even, Cecil and I approached the state, or they approached us about the status of this application, and they're going, where is this, what are you guys doing? We said, well, it needs to be resurrected. And they said, we're really not interested in funding a project that's only going to serve the high school. If we're going to do a project, we want to serve the community. So they basically instructed us to go back to the drawing board and say, you need to redo your scope, your cost estimate, your environmental document. If you're interested in a project to serve the community, then we'll talk to you. So the funding opportunity is kind of unprecedented. Recently, this particular program got about $650 million, all allocated toward grant, with a focus on septic to sewer projects for small disadvantaged communities. So one of our concerns was, well, this is a sizable project. Most public projects, they say, oh yeah, we can get you funding, but we can only get you up to so many million in grant. We can get you 5 million grant or 10 million grant. And they said they've waived all the grant cap components for these septic to sewer projects. The project can be as big as it needs to be, and all 100% funded with grant. You just got to get your application in and beat everyone else to the punch to get the money, kind of thing. So again, the Clean Water State Revolving Fund instructed the district to update your scope, your project cost estimate, and your environmental. Get it into us as soon as you can, so that we can fund the project. And like everything, there are always timelines, right? So the timelines associated with this state funding are that by June 2024, the state needs to issue a funding agreement for the project. That's the deadline to take advantage of this funding. And then they're giving you until June 2026 to spend the money. In other words, construct the improvements. Sounds like a ways out, but there's a lot of things to do in the meantime that gets here in a hurry. So to try to meet these time frames, one of the critical path items for project is you need to redo the environmental document that was done for the high school improvements, because now you're expanding and now there's more potential environmental impacts, and the state requires to go through surveys and that sort of thing, and that's a 12-month process. So before you get an application into the state, you're 12 months from now if the community decides and the board decides to proceed with the project. So you can see that June 2024 deadline starts coming quickly. You've got to apply for the funding, you've got to wait several months, sometimes a year or more, to get a funding commitment back from the state. Then you've got to design this huge project and get it out to bid and build it, and you can see how the time frames really start stacking up. So at this point, we've kind of, obviously serving the MacArthur area is the top priority. We have to build all this infrastructure down 299 to get it into the Fall River system, so it makes sense to serve, those that want to be involved along the Highway 299 corridor. So those are two obvious areas to be included. The Fairgrounds, the district's been talking to the Fairgrounds, and it's desirable to try to serve basically everything in the Fairgrounds except for the RV park that's currently served by its own little collection system and pond treatment system. So there's several other buildings and other businesses and schools and things served in the Fairgrounds that we would try to bring into this system. And then there's the little Sierra Center subdivision, north side of the highway before you get into Fall River Mills. That would be an obvious one to try to serve as well. And then finally, the Fall River Golf Course is all on, those folks are all on septic systems too, so they could be brought in to the system. So, you know, adding all this infrastructure into an existing system, there's some infrastructure limitations in the Fall River system that have to be dealt with as well, and particularly lift stations. So the hospital lift station in front of Mayor's Memorial would have to be completely redone. Basically, we could reuse the wet well, but we need bigger pumps, but more, you know, updated electrical controls, all that sort of thing. And then the force main that it pumps through to get to the ponds would have to be upsized. And then the district has two other lift stations that would be impacted by these other systems coming in that would have to be improved. So these next three slides are really not really intended for you to see, that's why we brought these. So the first slide here, this is kind of our preliminary layout of the MacArthur area, and this property is owned by the Fairgrounds. We would try to serve these folks as well. Now keep in mind, we put this together without really any design. We've had no surveying done, we're using Google Earth elevations. So if you come up and say, well, God dang, I know that this is, you know, not downhill, it's really uphill. You may see some anomalies like that, but for this level of planning for you guys, we think it's more than adequate. Once you get into final design and you do plan and profile and surveys and that sort of thing, some of these alignments may change a little bit, but it gives you a feel for what we're thinking based on the information we have. And then the second figure here, this is a little smaller scale, you gotta get a little closer to it to see the red lines, but this is the Highway 299 corridor. This match line right here would match with this line right here. It's just a continuation west along the highway. And then it ends down here at the hospital lift station. This is Mayor's Memorial Hospital right here. You kind of get a feel. One of the challenges with the folks along the 299 corridor is, you know, with a sewer system, it's best to try to collect people by gravity. There's no energy required, there's no pumps, there's no blockages. It gets flushed, it flows down the pipe, and it's out of everybody's hair. It's a challenge with some of these folks along the highway, especially those that are, you know, several hundred feet away from the highway. We have to run a gravity line at a 2% grade, which means it needs to fall 2 feet in 100 feet to maintain flow. So if you're 300 feet, you've got a 6-foot drop, you know, to get out to the main, and the main's already 8 feet deep. So to serve these guys by gravity, you'd have a 20-foot deep main in the highway, which is, it's doable, but it's difficult and very expensive, especially dealing with Caltrans and all of the hoops that they need. So what we kind of propose here is that if some of these folks along the highway want to be in the project, we would propose to do a septic tank effluent pumping system. So in other words, these folks would keep their septic tanks, but they would have pumps put in the septic tank that would pump through a small diameter pipe out to the force main. So the only thing they would be eliminating would be their leach field. They would still have the maintenance on the septic tank. It would still need to be pumped as often as you guys pump your current tanks, and there would be a pump to maintain. So it's not nearly as attractive, you know, for some of these folks to have that kind of system versus someone with a gravity lateral that leaves the property. And then this final figure here is, this includes the Sierra Center subdivision right here. You kind of see that. And then this is the golf course. This is really grainy, not great quality. Like I say, we don't have really good photos and surveying yet, but this is kind of generally how that area can be served.
I have a question about our RV park over here. Would you hook up something like that over there? Are you talking about MacArthur Mobile Home Park?
Okay, down the highway a little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
It would be, it would certainly be eligible for this kind of funding. We haven't worked that in to the project now, but it certainly could be worked in.
Can we hold questions till the very end, until we get to the question and answer period, please? And by the way, there is water available back here, everybody wants some help yourself.
So in terms of costs, a cool 33 million bucks will get it done. Not cheap. I'm sure all of you have been subjected to some extent to all the supply chain challenges right now, getting just about anything. It seems like everything we buy has a component that is 8 months out. And we're seeing that on the infrastructure work too. We have several projects that we bid, awarded, issued notice to proceed to contractors, and they're saying, I can't get PVC pipe for 6 months, or 8 months, or ever. They don't know. So, you know, part of the challenges with estimating these projects is what's the cost of construction gonna be in February 2024 when this thing gets bid? As engineers, that's a challenge we have, trying to see the future. If I could see the future, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you guys, I can tell you that. But nevertheless, we have tools and we try to make conservative estimates. We add inflation factors. We try to put fat contingencies built into the project. And so this is a very rough order of magnitude cost that is not based on any design at this point. But the point is, it's a very expensive project. So, going to start into some questions. Maybe I'll answer some that you're thinking of, and we'll, like I say, stay as long as we need to answer any other questions you have. So, first question we have is, will the project pay for work required on private property, including the new sewer lateral and connection to the dwelling or business plumbing? I'm sure that's on a few folks' mind. The answer is yes. So the grant will pay to build a lateral across your property, make the connection at your home plumbing. The grant will also pay to abandon your existing septic tank in accordance with Shasta County requirements, and that usually includes taking the top off the septic tank, pumping the septic tank out, and backfilling it with usually an imported gravel. So if say your septic tank is in a nice manicured lawn, then the project would need to replace the lawn and everything after abandoning the septic tank. Okay, we covered the septic tanks. They will do that. Next question. Will the district contractor perform the work on private property? Seems intuitive based on the previous question, but somebody might ask, well, the project pays for it, but do I have to go out and hire my own contractor and then get reimbursed? And the answer is no. The intent would be is that the district's contractor that's doing all the work in the public right-of-way would be the same contractor doing the work on private property. So typically what we do is the district would need to get a right of entry agreement from every one of you. It'd be an agreement between the district and you basically that establishes terms and conditions for the contractor to come on the property, and maybe there's an insurance indemnification that releases the property owner of any claims if the contractor breaks his leg or whatever, that sort of thing. We've done it quite a bit. We did it on a big water project in Weed about 10 or 12 years ago, and it worked pretty well. As opposed to getting formal recorded easements across your property, that's kind of a pain and expensive and time consuming, and it's really not necessary. Okay, if the district implements this project, will I be required to connect to the new system? So this is something that we're still kind of talking about, but I think in general, the district has no jurisdiction over your existing septic systems. Shasta County does, right? If you guys need to get a permit to replace a leach line or extend a leach field or whatever, you're going to get a permit from Shasta County, not Fall River Valley CSP. So Shasta County also has specific requirements in code that addresses situations like this where you have a community served by septic systems where a community sewer system comes in. They have requirements that may or may not require you to hook up. And so we have Ken Henderson here from Shasta County, and so I'm gonna take the easy way out and kind of defer to Ken a little bit and see if he would like to add a little bit to that. So Ken, it's your floor.
How's everybody doing tonight?
Good. Why don't you come up front, Ken, so everyone's one way instead of 5 or 6?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. See, you must be the man in charge.
Yeah.
So again, my name is Ken Henderson with Shasta County Environmental Health. I'm one of the people involved with permitting of septic systems in the county. As some of you might be aware, we were given new standards to go by the state back in 2018. And so one of those standards is that the state wants, whenever there is public sewer available, people to connect to it. So our requirement as of 2018 is that if you are within 200 feet of a public sewer, when your system fails, that being your leach field fails, you would be required to connect to that sewer and abandon your leach field. There are, a couple exceptions, if the cost is, astronomical for the sewer connection, there's a chance that the requirement may be waived, but in general, that the requirement is if you're within 200 feet of public sewer, your leach field fails, you then have to connect to the sewer. So.
What if your leach field doesn't fail? I guess I'm new, sorry.
Yeah.
So like say you're within 200 lines and your septic's totally just glorious, fine, are you still required to connect to sewer?
No, the trigger
Do you
for
wait
us,
for it to fail?
the trigger for us is failure. So,
Okay.
in general, leach fields last about 30 years. Some might last longer if you just have amazing soil and you're an empty nest couple and it's just a tube, you don't use much water. You could get 40, 50. I've seen some properties that are right on the river in Reading that the leach fields in gravel tailings that they've lasted 60 years. But eventually every leach field fails. And the question is when it does fail, is it going to be cheaper to continue to be on septic, or would it be cheaper to be on sewer? And it sounds like there's a really great opportunity for funding right now for people that are in septic that could potentially be on sewer for you guys to make that move now and then have the state pay for it versus having to pay for it yourselves in the future. So I'm happy to ask. And yes?
I got a long narrow lot, and so I'd like the highway, but my residence is 200 yards from the highway. Is that, is that in or out of your 200 foot?
I believe the way our standards are written is it's 200 feet from the building that the sewer will serve. So if your building's over 200 feet from the property line, then our standard may not apply to you. That said, you do defer to local requirements. So if for some reason there's a local requirement, such as the city of Reading, their requirement is 200 feet from the property line. So we defer to their standard in that case. We don't use our standard. But,
I have a question. We live in the mobile home park over here also. What is it going to happen from where it shows the line coming in to the different homes in the mobile home park? What's this gonna cost? And is it covered under this?
was the mobile home park part of the project?
No, it isn't. None of the figures or maps we have considered yet, so I don't know the answer to your question. We'd have to look at it on the ground, but it's certainly possible to serve.
Okay, so how can we get the information we need?
Well, that's these guys will have to direct me to do something.
Okay, thank you.
But it is possible to add it into the project.
Okay.
So I'm here if anybody else has any other questions. If you think of anything, I'll be hanging out.
Ken, before you go. Talk to these folks about the economics of a septic system versus a sewer system that you
Yeah, Yeah, so for those of you that, you know, let's take
We're gonna miss something if there's 10 conversations going on at once.
So I was asked by Cecil to speak a little bit about the economics of a septic repair versus connecting the sewer. So, you know, I work a lot with contractors in Shasta County, and from what I hear right now, a leach field replacement, just for a standard leach field, is running around $15,000. So if you were to split that cost over the average lifespan of 30 years, you're looking at a monthly cost of over $55 a month. So I believe that their rates right now aren't even like that. And you know, they might approach that at some point, but at that point, you know, what is the cost of that septic system going to be when it's $15,000 now? If you're in an area of the county that has marginal soils, let's say you have issues flushing your toilet in the wintertime. That leach field now went up to about $25,000. So these are things that definitely should be thought about, like when you're considering whether or not you should take part in this project, or if you guys want this project to move forward. So, does that answer your questions?
Quick question for those that mentioned the mobile home park. Did you guys talk about this one here?
Yes.
Okay. Isn't there one further down? Okay, you're talking about the one right in the garden. Yeah, so got it. So we have a sewer stubbed out right here. It's about 7 feet deep.
I think it's about 7 feet deep.
About 7 feet deep. The thing that we don't understand yet is how the plumbing works in there. But it's yeah, I can't wait. But the bottom line is we've got a 7 foot deep manhole here, and we can collect anything on that site. We just gotta get it into. So sorry about that, I didn't understand which one you guys were talking about. Okay, so moving on to some more questions here. Okay, when I connect with the sewer system, will I be required to pay a monthly sewer bill? I think you know the answer on that one. And it will, you know, the district establishes those sewer rates. The concept would be that there would be a sewer rate for Fall River and MacArthur. It would probably be the same sewer rate. You know, everybody in both communities pumps their wastewater. It all has to be pumped to the ponds. So, a little reluctant to go on record with that now, but I think that's kind of been the preliminary discussions on it. The current sewer rates, March 2021, $35.19. You guys see that?
This is Fall River's rates.
Fall River's rates, yep.
At present.
And then March 22, they'll go to 42, and March 23, they'll go to 49. Give you an idea on what, you know, the rates could be in the ballpark of this project if and when it goes to fruition. Okay, will I be required to pay a sewer connection fee similar to new development within the district? And this is when you have, you know, a new home or a new business comes in. The connection fee is intended to be that system's buy-in to the infrastructure that all the rest of the people have been paying for years and years and years. So right now, that connection fee is about $2,500. We did get confirmation this week that that's a project eligible cost. So the state will pay the connection fees for all the new connections into the system. And so what the district uses that money for is to upgrade the wastewater treatment plant and make improvements to it to accommodate this bigger load. So that's a pretty attractive feature of the funding. What's the schedule for the work being completed on private property? I think we can probably say with reasonable certainty that nothing would happen before 2024. What will happen, typically what happens is the contractors come in and they build the mains first. They build the mains and the manholes in the streets and alleys and public rights of way. Once those mains are installed and tested, we run mandrels through, we do CCTV inspections and we do air tests in the main before they're allowed to connect any laterals to it. And then they would come in, install the laterals, so that would be a later or subsequent phase in the project. So that's not gonna happen right out of the gate. Sir, you got a question?
I just kind of picture where you're gonna put the big pipes, or maybe not on the road, but next to the road. I mean,
Well, some will be in the roads. One of the things that we tried to do, you'll notice in MacArthur, you see these lines going down the alley. That's a much less expensive install. It's about $30 a foot cheaper to be gravel than it is pavement. The other advantage here is we're suspecting, and keep in mind, we haven't done any final design here, but we're suspecting, on lots like this where all the homes are in front of the lot, the septic systems are probably in the back. So we put the main in the alley, we've got a nice direct open connection to make, rather than having to go through your front landscaping, across concrete driveways, sidewalks, that sort of thing. So it's less expensive, and I think it's less impact for the property owner. So you kind of see that in certain areas. We've got it through the alley here as well. But you also see it in the main, or in the streets. You got Grove Street here, and where you have a nice wide paved street, if you've got a nice gravel shoulder, we get that sucker in the shoulder, because you're saving $30 a foot to get it outside the pavement. So we look at all those things. And again, this is real preliminary, but
How long is this job gonna last?
I expect it would have to go through 2 construction seasons. So, you guys get winters up here.
Yeah.
And, of course, last winter, they probably could have worked all winter and, not any weather impact. Same with us again. But realistically, you're shutting the project down up here by Thanksgiving, and you're probably not starting it until late April. And so we kind of go in kind of thinking that. And so therefore, you're going to need a full spring, summer, fall, 2 of those to probably build this thing. Okay, one of the things, kind of a segue on question 7 is, you might wonder, geez, am I going to get out of bed one morning and there's going to be an excavator in my front lawn digging a big trench? No. In the bid documents, we would create, the contractor would be required to provide notice to you guys. Typically, it's 30 days that we're going to be in there on this date and doing the work, so you've got time to plan. And I've got some more questions kind of pertaining to impacts to animals potentially and that sort of thing that we'll get to here. Will I experience any interruption in water or sewer service while the contractor is working on my property? Generally, in most cases, no. And the reason is because as part of the design effort, each one of you is going to talk to a design engineer before the project's done. We're going to come knock on your door nicely, not too early in the morning, and we're going to ask you some questions like, hey, do you know where your septic tank is and your leach line? And do you have any preferences on where this line needs to go? Are there any constraints we should know of to enter your property? Do you have animals, that sort of thing? We can build all kinds of mitigation into the project to accommodate you guys. And at the end of the day, that's what it's about. The project is to serve you. So a lot of that gets worked out in the design effort. That being said, there's always circumstances where I've got to get a pipe from A to B and there's something in the way. And I can't adjust the grade of my sewer because it's got to flow that way. And so a contractor may have to say, cut out a piece of your water service and reroute it. Well, you might be out for an hour. And situations like that, they do happen, so I can't guarantee you won't be interrupted, but there are circumstances that happen like that. We try to work as much of that out in design as we can, but I know from being a homeowner that I installed all the utilities in my property, and it's been too long, I couldn't tell you exactly where they were. And I doubt most of you can either, and we understand that. Yeah, will I have any input on where the sewer lateral is placed on my property? Absolutely, that's part of this design effort. In some cases, there's a lot. We have a lot of flexibility, but we have to connect at a certain point, you know, we can't move where it comes out of your house, and we can't cross the neighbor's property to get to the main. So you're confined, you know, within your property and where the point of connection is on your property. But we can certainly miss features, you know, driveways, hardscape, you know, expensive landscaping and that sort of thing. Okay. Kind of covered that, talked about the placement of mains and streets and alleys to minimize cost and improve access to existing plumbing. And in general, I think it's important to point out that, you know, we would like to connect as close to your house as possible, you know, without really tearing things up. And the reason is that every piece of pipe that we put in is going to be subject to very strict quality control and testing. We know that from that point of connection, clear to Fall River is going to be very tight and not leak. And every gallon of water that leaks into the system, these guys have to treat. So we want the system to be tight. So I would trust our contractor and our inspector and our quality control over your 50-year-old plumbing. So I want to eliminate as much of that as I can and get as close to your house as I can without tearing up your house. So, you know, that's obviously, you know, you have to make a judgment at some point and say, okay, this is as far as we can go. You know, we understand there's going to be a length of pipe that might be a 40-year-old pipe into your house that, you know, we have to live with. Okay, what if I don't know where my existing septic tank is? That's kind of an important feature for us in the design phase, because it, you know, it really sometimes makes a difference between placing a main in an alley or out in the street. You know, if 6 out of these 8 homes are in the back, then it's a no-brainer. So we really need to nail that down. And there's different ways we can do that. We can bring plumbers in, they can run snakes, you know, down a cleanout with a transmitter on it, and they can trace the line where it exits your house. And we may have to do that on some of your plumbing if we just don't have a clue where it comes out. And that would all be worked out in the design. Will the project have any impact to my property taxes? That's always a great question. Because traditionally, these types of projects, there was always a loan component, and then there was an assessment put on your property tax bill, and it was there for 30 years. You guys, I'm sure you guys are familiar with that. In this case, this is all grant funded. There is no loan, there is no surcharge or increase on your property taxes. So it's not like the traditional assessments that you guys might be familiar with or been exposed to in the past. This is 100% grant funded. Okay. Will there be a cleanout installed at my point of connection? And we kind of wrestled with that, and you know, cleanouts are not that expensive, and we can certainly do that. I think the feeling from the board and the staff is that, like, most of you would want a cleanout at that point of connection, and that's easy to do. We can certainly do that. But in addition, we're going to put a cleanout at the property line too, and typically it'll be up to the board, but typically that property line becomes the point of delineation between what the district's responsible for in the public right-of-way and what you guys are responsible for on private property. So even though the district's contractor is going to install this line on your property with grant dollars at no cost to you, you're going to be responsible to operate and maintain it. So that's, again, I might be speaking a little out of turn for the board. That's what I'm familiar with in the communities that I do district engineering in. I don't know that that's the district's policy, but so you guys know, there will be a clean out at the property line, and it'll be up to the board to decide, you know, that delineation point. Okay, another question. I don't know if there's any cases like this, but maybe you have separate gray and black water lines. You know, what happens, you know, the black water line goes to the septic tank, the gray water line goes, you know, wherever it goes. In those cases, we need to know that. And we will have our contractor make the plumbing modifications on your property to bring those two together before we plumb it into the sewer. Just let us know during design. Okay, we're getting close. I've got 5 more, and then I'll open it up. You guys can pepper me. Okay, here's a good question. You know, what if I have a fence yard? How would a contractor coordinate keeping animals safe? That sort of thing. You may have dogs or other animals. That's one of those things that you would work out with the designer, you know, early on. If we have to put up temporary fencing, if we have to put in temporary kennels, if we have to work out a boarding arrangement, you know, we'll do whatever we need to do. You guys just need to communicate that to the designers when it gets to that point. And that's all paid for by the project. Who do I call if my sewer line backs up? No, I think, you know, typically you would call the district and then they would ask you, well, where's it backed up at? You know, is it backed up, you know, on your property, or is it out the street, or, you know, that kind of thing. But when you become part of a community sewer system, generally you call the district first. And, you know, you work out whatever the case may be. Just call Cecil. Okay, is there any warranty on the improvements installed on my property? And the answer is yes. Typical public works contracting, contractors are required to provide a 12-month warranty from the time that beneficial use is taken over. So it doesn't necessarily have to be at the very end of the project after a notice of completion is filed. It's when the district or the owner of that facility takes beneficial use. So once they make a connection to your system, you're flushing whatever down the line, you're taking beneficial use, that 12-month warranty would start at that point. So at any time, 12 months after that connection is made, if you have any issues or problems with anything, you notify the district, they get a hold of the contractor, and they come up and rectify whatever the situation is. We haven't had too many issues with that. One of the big, you know, kind of warranty things on public works project is compaction in trenches. But this project will have full-time inspectors doing compaction testing, and it's rarely a problem. But there's always, I mean, nobody's perfect, and there can be things. But it's a 12-month warranty from when you take beneficial use. Do I need a building permit to connect to the new system? We're working on this. Of course, not to throw Ken's agency under the bus, but if you ask Shasta County if you need a building permit, the answer is always yes. So, but Keith and I have done several of these kind of community projects over the years, very similar, and we've never had to get building permits. So, we're saying that Shasta County says right now that we're gonna need to get them, but I don't know that they understand that there's gonna be 200 of them, plus. And who's gonna do the inspection? Are they gonna come up and do all the inspections? So we need to continue to work with Shasta County and make them understand that, you know, we've got full-time engineers in the field and inspectors during construction, full-time, every day, watching the things go in, we're reviewing material submittals and all that. So that's not a definitive answer yet, but I just wanted to throw out there what we've been told today. And if building permits do end up being required, it would be something that the district or their consultants would facilitate. They may need a signature from you guys as a property owner, but you wouldn't have to put the permit together, the application rather. Here's a good question. Can I drive over the new sewer lateral on my property? And, you know, we're all, those of us with septic systems, you know, you try to keep the heavy loads off the top of the septic tank and don't really want to compact the material that we release lines. These pipelines are different. They're very durable they're gonna be at least 2 feet deep in compacted soil, bedded in sand. You can drive anything you want over. They're not gonna be damaged by vehicle loads. I just added a little bit here. Typically, if your sewer lateral is going to be, say you have a gravel driveway from the alley that goes up to your house, and you know we like to put pipes in gravel driveways because it's nice and open. But if we do that, that whole pipeline would be backfilled with imported gravel, and compacted to 90–95% so it doesn't settle. It's a little more expensive installation, but sometimes it can be better for us from an efficiency standpoint. Okay, I think this is the last one. And this is another good question too. Why are we pumping raw sewage from MacArthur to Fall River Mills? Anybody think about that one? The Fairgrounds has existing sewer ponds. Can they be expanded to accommodate MacArthur? One of the issues with the Fairgrounds ponds is they receive septic tank effluent. They don't receive raw wastewater. So they are permitted for septic tank effluent. Now, both are pretty nasty, right? But the difference is that in a septic tank, all your solids theoretically are, settled out in that first chamber. And then the second chamber is what they pump out into the pond. So the regional board, the regulatory agency over the ponds, they're not permitted to take raw sewage. So that would be a challenge. The other challenge is that when the state looks at these kinds of projects, the first thing they want us as engineers to look at is, can you consolidate with your neighbor so that we only have to regulate one treatment plant instead of two? And so this would be a very hard sell to convince the regional board that we want to build a multi-million-dollar wastewater facility in MacArthur when Fall River is a reasonable distance away and they have capacity to take MacArthur. I don't think we could sell that to the regional board. So that's the reason why we're proposing pumping the Fall River Mills. Okay, couple more. I've got a few more slides here. I'll get through that and then I'll open it up to questions. That sounds all right. Why support the project? The project funding opportunity is unprecedented. It may sound a little bit like a sales pitch, but I've been doing this for 31 years, and I've never seen a funding opportunity like this in 31 years. So I think it's safe to say it is unprecedented, where they just take the grant caps off, say, we don't care what your project is. If you're small and disadvantaged and it's a septic to sewer project, you name the price. So it's a huge opportunity. The grant pays for all the work on private property. I mean, technically, the only expense to you guys is that monthly sewer bill, which I'm not saying that's insignificant, but that's really the only financial impact. And, if depending on the state of your septic system, if you're someone that just replaced your septic system and you got 30 years of life, you're probably not real in favor of a project like this. But if you've got a 30-year-old septic system that is getting close, this may be a favorable project for you. Depending on your attitudes, you bring in a community sewer system, it becomes easier to build homes. It's easier for businesses to come in, depending on your perspective, bringing jobs into the community or more housing, that sort of thing. Community sewer systems tend to promote that. And it may increase the value of the property. I know I've seen appraisals done where an appraiser will add a deduction to the appraisal for a septic system that's more than 20 years old. So if you're trying to sell a property or, for whatever reason, and I know that's not in everybody's mindset, but if you are in that mindset, arguably your property would be more valuable with a community sewer system. Okay, next steps, just quickly rifle through these. I kind of alluded to this a little bit. Number one is the environmental. That's about a $70,000 expenditure. Takes about 10 to 12 months to do. And then the district would need to complete the application that's already into the state, just needs to be modified, all the forms redone, new scope of work, cost estimate. And then at some point the district would need to consider strategies for doing the design. One option, and the design is a huge effort and it takes a year. If it waits until it gets project funding, and then takes a year to design it, and then another 4 months to bid it, construct it, you may not finish by that June 26th deadline, believe it or not. So the district needs to decide whether it wants to, take out some kind of, interim financing to start that process sooner so that it can meet those deadlines. And keep in mind that whatever the district spends up front, that's all reimbursable back to the district when the grant comes through. So that's why we call it, it's an interim financing arrangement. Typically, they would work out an arrangement with the local bank, they'd pay finance charges and fees, and then it would be reimbursed back to them when the grant comes in. So just, I think this is my last slide. Kind of a approximate project schedule. So if the district very soon authorizes the environmental, theoretically in a year, September 22, that would be ready. So the final funding application would be submitted. Assume it takes the state a year to process it. By September 23, you would have a firm funding commitment. The completed design in December 23 makes the assumption that the district starts the design before it has the funding commitment, because you won't be able to do it in 3 months. And then bidding award, you're probably looking at spring 2024, somewhere in there. Begin construction, later spring, early summer, May, say, in 2024. And probably, I think that earlier in the slide I said that the work of private property probably wouldn't start before 2024. I'm saying here that, that may not even start till spring 2025, after a lot of the bulk of the infrastructure's in. And then project completion, I had June 26th because that's the state's deadline for it. So just kind of, this is very rough. There's a lot of things to consider there. So with that, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that we haven't covered. Yes, sir.
So typically when you pull a permit with the county, they kind of look at your property, make sure everything's permitted on the property. So if you have a building that what you bought the property wasn't permitted, doesn't meet the codes, are they going to scrutinize each individual property to make sure that it meets all the code?
Yeah, that's the question. I lived through that situation, by the way. That's why we want to waive those things somehow.
Right.
The last thing we want to do is saddle everybody in here that has unpermitted infrastructure on their property. So I think we can do it. We may have to go to board of supervisors. But, what's that? What's that?
That's everybody around here.
Yeah, I do too. I keep,
Construction business.
Yeah. So, we don't have a definitive answer on it yet, but we're working on it. We're not going to go down without a fight. So, like I say, we just got feedback on it last week, so we just have to jump through. Yes, sir.
The state's funding this because we're going to make our groundwater safer, our environment cleaner. I mean, there's a good science that this is good for our community.
Yeah, it's difficult for me to speak on behalf of the state. I'm not the state. But I think in general what you said is probably plays into it to some degree. I mean, there's environmental issues with septic systems. They tend to put nitrates into the groundwater. Is that a big deal for you guys? You have a community water system. But there are systems that have quarter-acre lots, have a septic tank, and 10 feet over is their well. And there's nitrates in the well. And you guys don't have that, obviously, but it's an environmental thing. It's a public health thing, to some degree. Some people have failing septic systems. They got leach lines bubbling up in the lawn and they don't do anything about it. They have kids and dogs or whatever else out there playing in that stuff. I'm not suggesting any of that here, but that's kind of the state's mentality. So I don't know how the funding was allocated, for this. All I know is that they're targeting septic to sewer projects for small disadvantaged communities. And you guys qualify.
What if we say no? Where's that funding going?
Someone else?
Yeah.
Yeah. $650 million sounds like a lot of money, and it is. But California's a big state, and Southern California is a heck of a lot bigger and more influential than us. The thing that we have that they know is we probably have more smaller disadvantaged communities up here than they do in the LA basin. So a lot of that funding does get up here, but someone else will get it. Yeah. Yes, ma'am?
Sometimes the sewer ponds really give off a foul smell that blows across the valley. So if you make them even bigger, are we gonna have even a
Yeah, that's a great question. God, it's hard to get that stuff not to stink.
Yeah, but it'll kick you dead.
It's pretty bad.
Yeah.
It's just,
For the land, it's a long way, but sure, for those reasons, for that, some of them are really good.
Is that like a northwest? Something from out of the northwest?
they're in that strip of island.
You guys won't let us in this everything.
Yeah.
You drive this out.
Yeah. Well,
There's ways to address that.
there is, you know, the current Florida ponds are not aerated. They basically, you know, the design concept is, you know, make the area large enough that all the oxygen transfer is just basically the wind blow across the surface. But you can impart more oxygen into that water and stabilize that, and the odors, basically you're smelling the sulfide, you can oxidize that. But it takes money. And it's something that we should probably look
hide in
into.
your basement.
What's that?
Be better than hiding in your basement until the winter.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's something we need to look into. Right now, on paper, they say that the Fall River ponds can accommodate the MacArthur.
So in theory, it should get worse.
Yeah,
Now you get it.
you're adding 200 homes. You're adding 200 homes. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good question. Ma'am?
What is the procedure for deciding to go forward or not? Is there a percentage of people who get on board to go forward, or is that, how's that happen?
That's a great question, and I don't know that the board has really considered that. You know, their motivation was to get this out to you guys. Haven't really talked about, I have been involved in similar projects where the governing board did a straw poll. And they sent out notices and you know, those who wanted to vote on the project, and they get like a 60 or 70 or 80% response. And, you know, a lot of times, equivalent percentage in favor of projects. They may want to do that. I haven't talked to them about it. I'm kind of speaking for them right now. But that's an idea to do. But I don't think the district is in position right now to make a decision. This is just kind of our first presentation to you guys to let you know the opportunity, what exists. Ma'am?
In the beginning, I heard someone said that there's a district contractor for maintenance and repairs. And then later on, you said that if it's on our side of the property, we have to maintain that. Could you kind of clarify, please?
Yeah, probably got myself in a little trouble there. That's something I'm familiar with, having a delineation of the property line.
Okay.
Where everything in the public right of way is on the district and everything on your property is you. I honestly don't know exactly what the district policy
So
is.
that'd be like a question.
It is, it's something that would need to be worked out. My recommendation to them would be to make that property line a delineation. That's the way most cities do it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jerry, you're up.
All right, I'll chime in. Right now, the way policies and procedures read is exactly what it said, is that we maintain everything from your property line out onto public property. Everything from your property line to your house would be up to you to maintain that. And it's just really easy to figure out, I think, is the fact that dealing with private property, that's what it is, it's private property. We're a public entity, so we could try not to get into private property. If there is a problem there and you can't solve it, it would be up to you to call a plumber and have him resolve it for you. If it's from your property line into our system, we'll take care of it halfway. And me personally, because I'm just one of you, if I get it plugged up, I'm gonna call Cecil and say, we're gonna plug up, can you tell me, is it your problem or mine? And he's gonna find out, because he don't want it to be his problem, and he's gonna wanna call me back and say, hey, that's your problem, don't bother me. So, but that's the way policy and procedure is right now, is that from the property line to you is yours, it's private property, it's all yours. From there out to the main line, that's all us.
That answer your question?
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Sir?
Yeah, just jumping the gun, there's some old abandoned houses and building lots here in town that have septic tanks on it. You're the owner of one of them. Could we kind of jump the gun and hook up those old septic tanks to the system, so we're kind of at that part grandfathered in to rebuild, Jerry or county?
I would say.
I know my family's got one,
Yeah.
and maybe 2 or 3 others.
I mean, typically,
Build on it.
typically we would stub out a lateral to a vacant parcel and just put a clean out of the property line. Because it's better off the district do that now with an engineering contractor versus someone else coming in later and cutting into their main. So in your case, you know, where you have an abandoned house or whatever, it's a good question. I think, as a minimum, you're gonna get it stubbed to the property line with a clean out. But that's a good question. It's something that we would have to
So
revisit.
along that line of thinking, if you had a operating septic system you weren't worried about in the next 20 years or so, would they still come on your property and do the same thing you just said? Because the project's already getting done, that would be cheaper in the long run than going and attaching the main line.
As long as you don't come out in the middle of the night and connect it without us seeing you. No, that's a great
Just
question.
a trailer house and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's a good question. It's something that we'd have to look into. Yeah, it's a good question.
And then, it's probably more of a question for the district. If you have that option, is there still like a month that gets into concern or is there a monthly charge if you don't have it hooked up? If you just have that clean out put up to your property, are you required to pay a monthly fee to have it there? Kind of like when they switched over, historically, I've just been told that there was an option for city water and they paid like a monthly fee to just have to hook up.
Do you guys have standby fees,
Yeah.
Jerry?
It's kind of early for that question.
Yeah, you guys are hammering.
Well,
Yeah. Yep.